First of all, I just want to say that I had always thought, growing up, that in any emergency situation, in any, disaster, for example, what matters most is survival. And so, for example, if you are flying and you have an aircraft several thousand feet above sea level, and suddenly the engine develops a fault, and it comes crashing down, and you're in that plane, I can imagine that first thought on my mind is survival anyhow. So I would be alarmed if some passenger next to me is suddenly talking about how he doesn't want his brand new Italian suit to get rumpled, or how that he doesn't want his baggage in the luggage cabin to get destroyed, or some documents. Everybody thinks of survival in any disaster. And so talking about disasters, I think about the case in our city. We've had our fair share over the last few years of disasters, natural disasters. We've had floods that have swept through. And, as sad as it is for those who have lost precious loved ones, as sad as it is for those who have lost property, and the challenges to the government and, town planning agencies and all of that, I think it also brings a challenge to each and every one of us. As far as I'm concerned, it's quite a challenge, even if it's in a metaphorical sense, that the floods sweep at our lives, that we find ourselves living in a generation and in a day where there is this persistent invasion on us. Just like how those floods swept into our city, I think we also live in a day where there's an invasion on us. Culture is being invaded. Our sectors are being invaded. Things are coming at us faster than we know what to do with it. And I think about the unprecedented nature of any flood. It's just happening right in your face, faster than you know what to do with it. And I think it puts us right on the spot. We find ourselves needing to make decisions for survival as the floods are coming in. I heard a joke the other day about a man who was out drinking one night. And suddenly he, got a little drunk. Well, not so suddenly, and then went home. And when he got home, he realized that he had misplaced the keys to his house. So he goes back to the bar where he was drinking, and the bar attendant says, "What happened?" He says, "I forgot my keys. I can't find it." And so he goes searching for it, and then he's searching in some area of the bar, and the bar attendant says, "Dude, was that where you were sitting? I thought you were sitting on the other side." He says, "Yes, but it is on this side there is light. So that's why I'm searching here." Now, we can put ourselves in a position whereby we want to just have the pleasure of doing life the way we want. But suddenly, when there is an invasion and a suddenness and a persistence, our sense of value is brought to the fore. Suddenly, our decision-making is put on the spot. We have to make right decisions, and we have to make them right away. For example, imagine one of those houses where a flood was sweeping in. Imagine one of those houses where suddenly water just began to trickle under the door and seep in under the door. And suddenly in that moment, it's all about, wow, a little water is coming in and my suede shoes are on the floor. So let me pick up my suede shoes and put them on some elevated place so that my suede shoes are safe. And then in another moment, when the water begins to build up, you start to think, well, now it's not just about shoes, but my electronics, my television, and let me save this from the flood. So I'm looking for how to elevate those to something higher. But suddenly, as the persistence comes in, suddenly as the flood sweeps in and the water level rises, you realize it's no longer about suede shoes, it's no longer about electronics, but it's about me, myself, surviving this flood. It's suddenly about how can the human being survive this flood. And I think that as we see the invasion on our culture, as we see the persistence of things happening so fast, so unprecedented, I think suddenly the question of survival will stare at each of us in the face. Suddenly we have to reevaluate, what are we making to survive the flood? Are we trying to get the suede shoes to survive? Or are we trying to get the electronics to survive? Or are we really trying to get the human beings to survive the flood? I want to say that I believe that people are at the center of the created universe. I believe that humanity is at the center of the created universe. And so as we build models, as we do community, as we have leadership and governance, and as we build families, we have to ask ourselves, what are we making to survive the floods? Because it's so easy in this dispensation, for example, to talk about governance. And it's so easy to forget that it's all about people. And all we think of is re-election. And all we think of is cheap popularity. And all we think of is some conscienceless, political points, that we are not really thinking about the fact that governance is really about people. And it's so easy, for example, to run a family in this dispensation, and all you're thinking about with the invasions of how fast life is happening, all you're thinking about is paying bills, and all you're thinking about is eating meals. And then you have co-tenants who are not really realizing that there are real people who have real emotions, and this should be a real relationship. I believe that people should be at the center. I heard a story the other day about a woman who was to be honored for teaching for many years in a school, and she was going to be honored. And, they said, we want to give you this honor because you have taught many of our students over the years, and you have produced great people. And so the compere of the event said, we're going to honor this woman for teaching math over the years. She's an amazing math teacher. She teaches math. And the woman said, no, I don't teach math. And they said, but that's why you're here. We want to honor you. That over the years, you've taught math for many years. She said, no, I do not teach math. They said, can you help us out? What's happening here? She said, I teach children math. All right? And it's so easy to get into structures and get into routines. And education becomes about school resuming and school closing and, school fees, that we forget that it's all about people. And so I want to say that as this flood invades, and as things happen so fast, and as life comes at us, and as the waters come at us, and as we face a culture that is unprecedented, and as we face days that we come in at us so persistently and sweep in a way that we don't even know what to do with it, I want to say that we mustn't be carried away trying to get things to survive, but we must realize that people are the priority of the survival. I'll give you an example. I remember last year, a few friends and I, we just thought of doing something for some what I would call vulnerable people on the streets. We realized that many people out there have dreams of being educated, but they just found themselves failing their school cert examinations and dropping out of school. And so we decided, okay, what's the common line with most of them? And it was the fact that they can't afford to pay to write these exams again. And so we said, okay, let's try help them out. Let's pay for them to write their exams. And suddenly in that moment, it dawned on us that we could sponsor people to write exams, but maybe it's a little more than that. If we sponsor them to write exams, we can get the kids' education to be saved from the flood. But how about the kids? How about a real person who went through school for years and suddenly faced failure? What about a real person who has emotions, a real person who has dreams, who can very well, yes, pass exams, but something within the person needs to also survive this flood? And so we decided, okay, let's do something more than a sponsorship. Let's do a mentorship. Let's have a dinner. Let's host these guys. Let's honor them. Let's do something for some street kids and some orphans and give them a sense of belief. You know what I found out? At the end of it, when most of them gave us feedback, it wasn't really about getting to write these exams again. But for most of them, it was about something deep within them. It was about something coming alive again. It was about a sense of value. And I realized it was so easy for us to have gotten the kids to survive, the kids' education to survive the flood. But what about the kids? And so this morning, I want to challenge us and ask, what are our models built on? What do we build our models on? What survives? It's so easy to want to run a business and all I'm thinking about is how much profit I can make. All I'm thinking about is how much I can get, that at the end of the day I forget that this is about real people. I run a structure in my family, I run a structure in my education sector, in the community, and we do things that just center around, items and things surviving the flood, but we forget the fact that it's all about people that the universe centers around. Let me close by sharing with you a fictitious story. I emphasize fictitious. I heard some years ago. And it's this young man who was, just gotten a brand new SUV for about 15 million naira, excited about it, and then was driving out one day just having fun. And then he has an accident, very bad. He's hit and his car is wrecked terribly. And then he comes out of the car, looks at his SUV. And then he begins to shout, got my 15 million naira SUV. Just go swearing and all of that. And suddenly in that moment, somebody looks at him and says, dude, are you dumb? You're shouting about your car. You didn't even realize that your entire left hand is cut off. And he looks at where the left hand was supposed to be and, looks at it, sees blood gushing out. The hand is not there again. And he says, the swear. And he says, my 1 million naira Rolex wristwatch is gone. I warned you it's fictitious, all right? But this is what I want to say. The dude was seeing. And he was seeing right. He wasn't lying. The car was wrecked. The watch was gone. But maybe we can question the values on which he was seeing. And I want to admit this morning that in trying to build models and say that we want to focus on what matters most, we want to get the people to survive the flood, I want to admit this morning that we might sometimes get to watch the suede shoes drawn away in the flood. I want to admit this morning that sometimes we might not make as much profit. I want to admit this morning that sometimes we might suffer losses of the wristwatch and, the SUV. Sometimes in trying to put people at the center of the survival of this flood, I want to admit that we might not always have it as profitable and as what you want. But this is what I want to say, that every suede shoe was made by a person and not the other way around. And so if the people survive the flood, then they can make the shoes again. If the people are made to survive the flood, if the humanity in the person is made to come through, then he can recreate everything that was lost in the flood. But if we allow the person to be drowned in the flood and we save the things, then it's just a matter of time before we realize that life is not really about things, but it's really about people. And so this morning, I want to say, let's place the right value. Let's place value on what matters most. I know the invasions are so fast. And I know life is happening faster than we know what to do with it. I know it is unprecedented. I know it's coming at us in our face in a way, in a persistent way that we have to make on-the-spot decisions. But let's put the value where it really should be. At the end of the day, we would realize that if our survival models are rightly placed, I think we will realize that, yes, it's important that in any disaster, what matters most is survival, but the question is whose survival and the survival of what? And remember that any good storyteller will never, think about it, allow the hero to die. Never allow the hero of the story to die. Thank you for listening, everybody.